and welcome back to the Cognition School Podcast. I'm so honored to have my friend Brandon Coccimiglio from Shield Performance, and I'm so honored because I know we've been talking for a long time, and we've been connected through our mutual clients, and we had an opportunity to meet over the at the rinks and at the coach's site as well. So, welcome to the podcast. Thanks so much for coming.
Yeah, thanks, Satoshi. Very honored, privileged to be here, and it's always good to just kind of talk shop. And it's you can't talk it with your friends or your family, so you got to get it out here in these outcomes. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I appreciate it. So, a couple of things for the people that are not familiar with yourself. Maybe you could start off just talking a little about your hockey background and then where you are today.
Yeah. So I was a hockey player from 4 year olds and on, and my dad was a very heavily involved coach growing up, and it was a big part of my career until I was 15. Was drafted to the OHL. Ended up choosing the scholarship route, which is unique because with all the changes in hockey, I kind of think back to those moments and those decisions I made. Went to go play 4 years for a Division I school called Mercyhurst. Had a great career there, and coaches were amazing. From Rick Gawkin, who's just retiring after this year. He's been there for a long time, and from there I went to go play my pro career, which kind of shifts. And I was in the minors, had a great career. Also struggled with injury, lots of ups and downs and adversity as every hockey player goes through, but also a lot of big learning curves. And I really like to think that everything I did before what I'm doing now set me up on a life experience to kind of, help what I'm doing today.
Yeah. And what inspired to start Shield?
Yeah, you know what? When I retired from hockey, I was, I think, 28. I was finished off in the British Elite League, and I remember that was the last year and a half. I really started struggling with having injuries, and it's something I struggled with throughout my whole career. Part of it was the way we worked out when we were younger, to the demands of pressure. My dad being a coach, I always had different pressure on me growing up. So I think when I retired, I was like in this phase of like, what do I do next? I don't see myself as, it's nothing against the industry, but working a 9 to 5 job. So I jumped into what I was used to in the environment of being in a gym and trained at my friend's gym for the last 3 years of my career. I started like kind of training myself, coaching myself, from what I've learned. And I love the aspects of what I learned during that time. And, from there, I remember my friend just is like, hey, do you want to start training like boot camps? And from there, within 6 months, Satoshi, I had like a 8 to like 9 o'clock schedule, doing boot camps, doing personal training, kind of just testing the waters with everything. I was pretty much just learning on the go at that time, and what I've learned from my career and just kind of applying to that. And from there it just started taking off. And then I started realizing like I really have to start learning the process behind this, start learning the other pieces that I never learned as when I went through my career.
Yeah. And by the way, what did you study at Mercyhurst?
So I was actually sports business. So I was,
Sports business.
yeah,
Okay.
I was in sports business. During my time there as well, I remember I was a thick Italian kid, put it that way. So when I was growing up, everyone was like, you got to get your 3 steps faster. Like they're just too slow. So, that gets stuck in your head from a young age all the way up. And it was until I was in college where I'm like, okay, like I got to make a change here. And I know I'm sure we're going to get into this after, but the change was everything of what I was doing away from the game to kind of get to those next levels in my career.
Yeah, so it's always interesting because I've had an opportunity to interview quite a few people now that's either gone the OHL route or the college route. And I'm always interested because obviously college isn't just about the hockey, it's also about your education and what kind of background you have. And obviously that coincides with what you're doing today with Shield and how you're expanding and how you're applying some of those business concepts. Are there certain things that you learned in school that you're applying at Shield right now?
You know what? I remember a professor that really kind of worked with me well when I was at Mercyhurst. He always talked about the power of presenting and, coming in with delivering, the essentials to get a point across, but also always trying to, create like this service to people where it's like an experience. It was funny, like he was way ahead of his time. It was those out of all my education there. It's the one thing that really stuck with me that became kind of like part of my methodology at a young age. But I didn't realize it until I was done playing hockey, where I came back to those moments. I'm like, okay, like creating an experience for someone, it's in an event, we're learning on how to put on big events and how we manage volumes of people into game day preparations, or if you want to be a general manager, if you want to go into marketing, like what does that look like? And, a lot of business principles, go into, development of an athlete. And it's the same. I actually just did an interview on the RBC talking about how, financials and improvements and high performers go hand in hand with athletes. And for me, I
Mhm.
just believe that everyone's a high performer in life. It could be a mother, a father, or someone like yourself who's taking things to a whole new level. So I remember back in school, I remember those moments, and it's like those little key moments that's that powerful, but come to you when you need them kind of the most.
Yeah, no, I think it's interesting because, a lot of people just want to play for the school and kind of move on. But I also think there's tremendous value in actually going to school. You know what? You may not necessarily, absorb everything they're teaching, but like you said, there's that one professor, that one moment that really kind of triggers you. Like for me, it's the same. Like I went to York University here, and I had one political science professor that all she taught me was dial zero to reach out to the prime minister's office. And honestly, that's all I remember from that
Yeah.
course. But there was a time where I actually did that. And I reached the prime minister's office and I asked them for certain things. And sure
Incredible.
enough, they delivered. It
Yeah.
was out of my, blew me away. Yeah, right. So, but those moments are really, really key. Now, as far as obviously with Shield, like tell me a little bit more about Shield for those that are not familiar with what you guys do.
Yeah. Yeah. So Shield has grown. And I think from when I first started to what it is now, like what it is now, it's one-stop shop, one facility that has an ice rink, has a performance center, gym, therapy clinic, and also a cardiac rehab clinic and three beach volleyball courts. So
Yeah.
the whole facility in the whole, if you just want to kind of narrow it down, it's development for everyone. So human performance development, where it's turned into now, like, yes, hockey is what we specialize in, but I just actually had a marketing meeting, and it's like, hey, like, everyone's a high performer in life. We can't just take like the hockey is like this massive network that you come into, but like development for everyone is the same, just at different levels. And people have different goals, but you always come back to these same processes. So our whole facility is a development facility, and I'm at a point right now is like, where do what areas could we do what in, and how we can just help a community. And I think hockey and those experiences and what I've learned from there has just brought over to what we can do in a community for a lifestyle for a parent, and use those same methodologies, those same modalities into everyone. Because essentially, like I said, a lot of times everyone's a high performer in their own life, and they all need attention, and they all need help of getting to their next steps, or getting out of maybe a negative state that they're in.
Yeah, no, I think it's really interesting that you said that because I have the same stories, right? Where we started off with hockey. That's where we started back in, 7 or 8 years ago now. And we're quickly finding out that the principles that we learn from hockey can apply in other parts of your life as well. So, we're really talking the same language here.
Absolutely.
And you talked a little bit about the Shield cardiac side. Tell me
Yeah.
a little bit more about that because that sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, you know what? I think this is like, so everyone finds a model that was inspired them, and then you try to mimic that model. It's just business, that's sports, what everyone does, a coach to a drill. So I was really exploring some models that called to me. And I remember it was right around COVID. I had someone that's in the hockey network come reach out to me, and she's like, my daughter is got diagnosed with a disease called POTS, and it's postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. And yes, that took me a long time to even say those words, but now that's all I say if I'm talking about it, I'm good. But really what it is, you could be at a sitting or a laying state, and then you stand up, your blood just shifts down, pulls into your stomach, and your nervous system just shuts down. Like it just, and it causes people to faint, cause people in daily lives that they get restricted with many things, and your whole lifestyle changes. So I had a lady, she came in, she was like, hey, like, can you help with this? And I'm like, myself, I go to my colleague Dr. John, who's the director of the therapy clinic. I'm like, hey man, I'm like, can we do this? I'm like, is this something that we want to try? Like, this is a new bucket. This is something that's way off our radar. But when it comes down to development, it's the same process. So it's like, how can we use what we did with the athletes and create an experience, create a culture for these people? Yes, the principles are different, but the development is the same. Like, how can we create a
Hmm.
comfort? And these people are a different demographic of people, for sure. But after COVID, like, the range of people started getting POTS is usually from 40 to 60, but now post COVID, it's like 13 all the way to 60 now. So we're getting young females that are figure skaters, football players that are struggling with this, and it's been misdiagnosed for years. And there's not a process behind it on actually how to care. And most cardiologists, like, it's hard for them to manage these people, so we became a support system for cardiologists to help manage this demographic of people. And that itself turned from, okay, we started off with 3 people. We did a quick thing with McMaster Health Science. They sent us some people to do a test pilot, and we got them all better by 70%. Symptoms relieved, and then we're just like, we got a little bit of confidence. We're like, wow, it's like all we did was we took models from like places in the States, people that do it, and it was hard to find info because there wasn't much out there on it. We tried it. I had a little team that we executed with, and it worked. And now we're have 70 patients in the program that have POTS, built out a clinic downstairs. We're working with several cardiologists in a 40-kilometer radius. We're one of the only cardiac rehabs that work with that disease. And now we just opened up the full model of cardiac care to post-surgical obesity issues. And now we're trying to see what we can do there. But it just comes down to, when we bring these people in, what is the experience that we can create for them where they feel comfortable and they want to make a change?
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Congratulations to you because, I mean, this is the one I think piece of information that a lot of people kind of miss out on, which is taking your expertise that you have and then just kind of repurposing it, maybe, fine tuning it here and there. And then obviously you had some clients as well that had that experience and you said, well, maybe we could do a pilot
Yeah,
program, right? And then that's now grown into something that's legitimate and you're servicing a need that goes well beyond hockey. So congratulations on that because I think
thanks,
that's the one
Satoshi.
thing that a lot of hockey coaches in general have trouble with. They just want to stay in their lane of just hockey, but then they kind of fail to realize, oh, there's other things that we could do here.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. Yeah,
yeah, that's fantastic.
thank you.
Coming into the coming back to the hockey side, so from the time that you played to how it is now, like how do you feel that, hockey's changed? Because obviously it
Yeah.
is a changing sport.
Yeah, you know what? I think about this question all the time, and I actually was in a debate this morning. When I was coming on here, I'm like, all right, guys, I'm going to ask this question to everyone. Like, where is everyone at with this? I look back at my career and look back now. I remember, the skill, the technical skill of what kids are doing now has changed completely from when I played to, what it is now, which really enhances their soft skill, their technical skills, and all those components. And it's tremendous what people are doing now. It's tremendous what kids can do with the puck. I look at this when I was in a state of like a 10-year-old going into 13-year-old going to my drafter, what I was doing and what I was learning. Then you fast forward it to like, then I think about my career when I got drafted in my next phase. I take everything in 3 years, right? Like every 3 years, something big is happening in your career.
Hmm.
And brings me up to my drafter. And I remember I was in the drafter. I'm like, what was I doing to prepare for draft? And what was I learning? And it was still the power skating, the practices you go out there, you do skill training, then your agents are taking you to places all over Ontario to learn. And it wasn't until I got to this one guy that was from Europe that my agency set up. We did an agency camp in Ottawa, and I went to this guy, and I was doing things I've never done before. And this was 15, it's about 15 years ago now. No, maybe even longer. And I remember I came out of that camp, Satoshi, and I'm like, my hands are unbelievable. I'm like, I'm toe dragging, I'm confident. I'm like, man, I'm like, I want to play shinny. And then I remember, like, I still do drills now here that I learned from that day. Like, just they get ingrained because it was a moment that I've never done. But I guess what I'm trying to say, that is now the norm everywhere, and those European coaches and really brought over a different element of what skill training is, right?
Hmm.
And it works, but now the thing is everyone's doing it now, right? So everyone's in that same category. Everyone's trying to rush to these, next best things. And but at the end of the day, like then I fast forward 3 years from that when I get into like my decision of like I was in junior A, do I go college or do I go OHL? Like what was I doing there? But that's when I kind of got caught in the transition of just like there's a different form of learning here now. And when I look back at there now, there it was just the same. It was like technical skill. You're coming, you're training your face off. You're trying to go to these big camps and schools your age you're setting off. But I think now the biggest thing that changed when kids get into the moments are the education the coaches have now at that age when you start getting into the OHL, when you start getting the NCAA, where those coaches know it's not about skill anymore. It's about how you are under pressure, areas on how you can think. And I think for me now, I've learned all that. I've learned that equation, but back then I had no clue. I thought being a good player was taking the puck end to end. I thought, being a force on the ice is what's going to be shown or what's going to be seen to stand me out, and it wasn't. And that's where, I find the biggest difference now. Everything's based off analytics, and then analytics shift people's mindsets, shift people coaches' methodology. So it's changed tremendously. And I think when I look at all the stages, yes, the technical skill has increased through the roof. But I think when you get to those moments of OHL and to those next steps, the education of coaches there are, way above what they were back then. And I think the coaches that had success back then were ahead of the game, like a Roger Nielsen, like those guys who were doing these
Yeah.
big camps, and all the coaches were learning from those guys. What he was doing, that was the way. But now you go to these coaches sites, like every person you come across, there's something you can learn from them. And the thing is they actually apply it. There's people that are good talkers that can talk it, but there's people actually talk it and apply it. And it's amazing what is now with technology and equations and finding where to work on your game now. So it's changed tremendously. And for me to kind of be in the situation I am, and you start training these players, that you get exposed to it, changes the way you think. But yeah, I hope I answered. Did I answer the question there?
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
I mean
I hope yeah,
it's definitely, there's a lot there that
yeah,
has changed, like you
yeah,
mentioned, right?
yeah,
And the one thing that, I grew up, learning from Roger Nielsen as a
yeah,
player.
yeah,
And like I had a chance to work with Greg Millen, and he was teaching me a lot about how do I score more goals from a goalie's perspective,
yeah,
right?
oh yeah,
And back then, and we're talking the 80s, right? Like this is like way back. And I remember Greg, and I know he just passed away yesterday, I think. But one of the things he was like, Tosha, like you gotta start shooting, thinking like you're a goalie, and the weaknesses that a goalie would have.
I love that.
And that was like an eye opener for me. So, again, that's like thinking the game, right? It's not even just I was a fast skater, I could shoot, I could, do all sorts of stuff too, but that was an eye-opening experience for me. And like you said, like you mentioned about thinking faster for the game, and being able to not just take the puck end to end,
Yeah,
that it is a team sport, that people are covering you. It's turning more a little bit more kind of like a basketball
yeah,
style of a
yeah, absolutely,
play.
yeah,
So obviously, if you want to develop smarter players as well as, the ones that are physically fit and prepared from a skill perspective. In your definition, like how do you define like a smart player?
yeah. I think it's depending on the age. If we go fast forward to like someone that's getting into the pro career, like it's really how they just manage themselves at a full 365 model. Like what is their what's their physiology like. I think that's the biggest thing, is like who they are as a person.
Hmm.
And you scale back everything, their stick hand, the mindset, where they are. It's like what type of person they are, how do they learn, how do they take feedback, and how do they make that change from the feedback they got. See, most players, even at the next level, you're constantly getting like, you know you're doing this wrong, you're doing that wrong, and some players take that and be like, I can fix this, I'm going to go through the steps to do that to get myself better. Where other players play the victim, and they get upset and they let ego get in the way, and they say, why? So for me, when I kind of really look at like a player, it's someone that can understand what their weaknesses are, find people that can help them fix that problem, that maybe has done it several times before with people that have done it at the next level, but then execute it and know that you can only learn really something one thing at a time, and they'll get good at that one
Hmm.
thing. So like I really look at those components of when I'm dealing with an athlete, you know, every ecosystem, from the ice, from, the gym, from the therapy, there's all these things built in on based off restrictions. And when there's a restriction that happens organically, how do they deal with that? And you see the best players always deal with the same. They're calm. They come out of there, you see them processing in their head, and they're thinking how they can get better at it. Then they ask questions quietly because they don't want anyone to know what their weaknesses are. And then you see them in the back room every day working on it, when all the group is finished and they're gone. It's those classic cliches, but it's they know they start learning the components on what development is, and then they start becoming the coach. So when you start seeing that, that's what I really look for, and the difference of a player and what they're doing. Like it's not anyone can go out and shoot 1,000 pucks, but like what was it purposeful? Like what were you working on when you were doing that, right? So it's yeah, and I get a guy like Owen Power who, he came back and this past summer and he worked on two things, one thing in the gym, one thing on the ice. That was it, whole summer. It was crazy. I was just like, this is what the pros do. And then you look at when they're on the world stage, rim puck, churn, pass, rim puck, pick it up, pass. That's all they do. Because that's to them, that's where they're going to get better. That's where they're going to build the proper reps, where is, at a high area in the game kind of thing. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's and it's interesting you say that because, usually people just want to work on a million different things, and then you're only, as good as the reps that you're putting in. And, like what you're mentioning with Owen is essentially just like doing that one thing extremely well. And I think that comes back down to your earlier comment about, who are you? You're finding your identity, and what are you really great at, and keep doing more of that. And then yes, there's certain weaknesses that you need to work on as well, but it's just that one thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I find that, and I find maybe, you'll agree that a lot of the coaches that are out there today, they try to do so many different things because they're touching so many different people and so many different weaknesses that it just kind of becomes kind of watered down a little bit, right?
Absolutely. 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 Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. As far as like your how you assess your athletes when they first come through Shield and how you take them through, walk us through a little bit about that process because obviously, if for people that are not familiar with you, they definitely like to learn more about.
Yeah, yeah. I think now that we have like the therapy clinic, the ice, and the gym, there's like these global components on like, we talk about there, when someone wants to get better, it's a learning process to start off. Like you got to deliver them in little components where they don't get overwhelmed. So when they get overwhelmed, they'll instantly give up. Or they don't know how to understand to take things they never heard about their weaknesses. So I think I'll start with the gym aspect. When we bring in the gym, the first thing that we do is we start talking to them. We open it up. To me, when I start working with someone like a high performer, regular person, or like maybe they're young and that parent's still involved a little bit, it's instantly a collaboration. Okay, like talk to me on what you think you need to work on. Talk to me on, the components where you want to get better. Right from those moments, you start really taking in what type of person they are. Like are they looking in your eye? Are they like I said, I'm assessing who they are as a person, because then I'm going to understand how to push them and what they need to have for success and what that looks like for them. So after that conversation happens, we get the goal oriented, we get those steps in place. We just go into assessing their movements. So once again, it comes down into like an exercise physiology, like how they operate themselves from a movement standpoint. And, we start testing their extremities from one leg to the other, where their deficiencies are at. Global coaches will test like force plate jumps, chin ups, their 10-yard sprints, those global aspects of like identifying where they are with everyone. But then you have to take all that in consideration. Then you have to really talk to them about where their weak areas are at and what's the plan to help their weaknesses. Okay. And every weaknesses has a process behind it, which, you really got to deliver to them slowly at one component at a time. So once we kind of learn, like, I'm at a point now for myself where I can really identify an athlete away from the game off the ice and know how they are on the ice. Like, you can pick up those traits very quickly. So, to set it in a nutshell, FMS or talk to them globally what they want, do a functional movement screening, do some strength testing, some force plate outcomes, then deliver pretty much to them what they need to work on. And then from there, like, how do they take that? And then you build a plan for them. But for me, sometimes people build out this massive global plan. I'll just build out the first 3 weeks. Let's see what he can do. So for me, that assessment is still in that 3 weeks. Okay, now let's get you in these movements. Let's get you into the strength. How are you handling when you got a weight in your hand, or how hard are you going to push? Maybe you're a guy that thinks you got to push way too hard, where it's like, no, like you got to slow it down here first. You got to understand the movements, like what's working. Let's teach them how to feel their body. So on an ice or a gym component, that's usually like the process there. On the ice, we have a lot of people like, I want my assessment on the ice. From there, it's, you take away all the key points of the game, the transitions, the speeds, footwork in tight areas, like confidence along the boards, so I'll get them into patterns that are in those game situationals and test them, and then, and break down what their areas of like movement patterns they need to help them get to the next stage. And it always comes down to posture. I'm looking at their posture. At the end of the day, for me, if a kid doesn't have posture, they're going to exert more energy. Their transition turns are not going to be good. They're going to miss that hole. Like, they're not going to be able to protect themselves. Can they ride on their inside edges and maintain their speed? Like, so for me, on the ice, like, you can test all these things. For me, it's just what's their posture like? And you see a kid that's maybe younger, they're dangling on the ice, their posture's terrible. And then you see like you get go fast forward to a Kucherov, he has a posture that creates success for him. Or, McDavid has a posture that creates success. So for me, it's identifying what the posture is and then breaking it down from there. And, usually both those ecosystems you can bridge, okay, posture, slow start. Okay, he can maybe stay in this posture for like 30 seconds, then he gets tired. Now he's out of it. Now he's back to his bad habits. What do I got to do to support that now? Okay, let's take it to the gym. Okay, we got to work on isometric strength. We got to build some cardiovascular and energy systems development, maybe mobility because he doesn't have the joint angles that we're looking for. And now you're piecing both those components together. But then when you build a program behind that, that's where the learning and the adaptation is. You're fully immersing yourself in something, and you get massive improvements in short periods of time. But then you got to do that for 3 years straight, because really, you're only work with these kids for maybe a couple months at a time. So it's
That's right.
yeah, so it's, from the ice to the gym, those are usually the components for me. And during that, I'm always assessing where their mindset's at. Like, what can this kid handle? Maybe there's a time where I'm going to assess, like, does this kid know what failure is yet? Does he really know what has he taken his body to a place he hasn't done yet? You don't want to do that all the time, but you gotta pick your times to do that. Like, what is this kid made out
Hmm.
of? So, yeah, usually that's for me. That's my process, and it's worked for me and it's created success for me. And at the end of the day, you're always keeping that player part of the process and collaborating with that athlete, whoever it is, at whatever age he's in.
Yeah. And is there like a typical age group that you work with the best?
Yeah, yeah. So right now, like, we pretty much have like each of those age groups from 6 to 9, from 9 to 12, from 12 to 15. But I think for me, where I'm at now, like, I've done all those my whole life. Like, I started off with just training the youth, like mass amounts of them. And then you really learn how to be a good coach when you can run a session and you have a 8 or 9 year old listening to you and like doing like the things and their focus. And like, to get them there, you got to understand, like, okay, I gotta connect the whole group. I gotta now get their heart rates up or they're just gonna be bouncing off the walls. Then I gotta keep on talking so they don't have the area to talk. And then I gotta get them to a point where by the end of the session, they're coaching themselves. But I set the tone. I'm like, hey guys, I just coached you 45 minutes. This last 5 minutes, you got to do it. But I do that with the professional athletes. The only difference is I'll get to the first 20 minutes, then they're on their own and they're coaching themselves. But we've set them up in the previous phases to learn what they need to feel, where they're at mentally. So I guess a
Hmm.
question for you, I've started off at those younger ages, grew up with players, but now I'm in an area where I'm working with more professional athletes and very fortunate to work with these people. And I think that's where my education has gone to another level, is because I'm working with them, as I'm learning from them. And I'm also talking to all their teams, all their coaches, their director of development, their strength coaches. And when you start get into those areas, you start just learning. You start learning, 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 and it's hard to meet expectations sometimes, but it's the best part about it. It's the connections you make with those players and what you learn from them. And every year they're coming back, they want something different, but there's a core principle there. So it's a very unique space, and you learn a lot from it. And you take that model and you try to pass it down.
Yeah, no, I think it's great because you're definitely one of those coaches that has that open mind and you're willing to, kind of go, okay, here's something new that I can implement as far as my player development is concerned. And you and I kind of met through the coaches site
Yeah. Yeah,
in person as well, because I was talking a lot about off puck movement and how do you get into those open spaces, and obviously speed and strength is important to get into those open spaces, but sometimes you kind of have to time yourself a little bit more.
absolutely.
how are you kind of implementing any of the things in your training as far as kind of teaching that aspect of the game?
That's a great question. I learned a lot. I guess I'll start back when I worked with the Brantford or the Bulldogs. I was there with Hamilton, and when they transitioned to Brantford, I was surrounded by people that were exceptional, high performers. People that been through it all. I was Steve Stais, Michael Anlauer, Matt Nickel, because he was the director of sports performance. Even Gary's Roberts' son was playing on the team. I encountered him. There was a couple Seattle kids on the team that I train currently now, and I was just like, I remember I walk in, I'm like, I can't believe I'm in this spot. These are people I looked up to. So I think, that was my really first eye opener of what what development should look like from a global standpoint from a team. Then from there, you take those components, each what they learned, and they all have different expectations, but at the end of the day, it's, they all have the same culture and it creates success, and they had tremendous success there. So that's when I first started, man, like, I need to learn, I need to think like these guys. So at this time, uh, you know, I started getting into the coaches side. I'm like, I needed to learn more. I had to bring my mind into working with that professional athlete. What are these coaches teaching? Then I started training a guy, Owen Power, Arbor Jackai, and all of a sudden I got connected with a guru of the game, Adam Nicholas. And this guy just came in, and I just listened to him talk. I had him come in to work with their players, and he just delivers like, he uses the form, you're in the jungle. You know what I mean? You learn all these forms. I got the word ecosystem from him, and I like it. And then you start hearing it in all these analytic terms, and you start understanding what he's trying to preach. And the one thing he taught me was the CLA process, the constraint learning or led approach. And when you get to a certain point, let's say OHL and to the next stage, everything's based off constraints, and letting the player figure it out themselves. Because at this point, they are they know how to skate. They have their skills. They know who they are. Now it comes down to two pieces. Like, how do I get these guys better? And the mindset. Those are the two things that takes them to the next level. Like, how do you develop an NHL player that's always the best in the world? So, using constraints in small area games was the biggest eye opener for me. And then I'm like, wait a minute. I'm like, there's constraints in everything we do in daily life, from the gym, a tempo, a weight we give someone, and now you got to control this weight. That's a form of constraint on the ice. The biggest thing that we work with was the constraint of time. I watched your seminar on the coaches site, a goal scored in 3 to 5 seconds. I'm like, okay, why am I going to do a drill that lasts for, 20 seconds long, where we're working on goal scoring in an ecosystem that we got to design where, like, hey, half wall play, get up to the point, one pass shot score. So you start working restriction of times, and then you start with working different kind of areas to promote an area of development. And the moment I learned this about a year and a half ago, that's all I've been studying now. Now I'm looking at basketball, like you brought up. I listening to how they use constraints in basketball. You're adding, all of a sudden you learn the technical skill, but let's add pressure scenarios in there. They got guys shooting like a foot behind the 3-point line, because that's going to enhance their 3-pointers when they step up to the line. So it's just amazing. It's simplified, but you're creating constraints based off what you see of your team or that individual to help them get better, and it's all based off for them to figure out what they need to do in that situation, and then promote the movements that they need to do to react off other people.
Yeah, no, I love, Adam's work, and I love his approach, and I think it's something that a lot of coaches need to understand and have that open mind, and it's one of those things that for coaches that kind of have that old school mindset, they don't last long,
No,
right?
they
Because
don't.
eventually they're just outpaced by people that are just willing to absorb it, but also
Yeah,
apply it, like you said.
apply. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. No.
Yeah, yeah.
100%.
And I know we have our conference coming up together, and tell us a little bit about more of that conference. Kind of even like, how did you conceptualize it, and and how things are looking so far?
Yeah, it's funny. Like, I went to a lot of seminars in this last year. I wanted to learn. I want to be better for the athletes coming in and be more prepared, and just for myself, or where I need to take my education. So I went to go see a lot of seminars, and Coaches Sites does such an amazing job, and the networking they do. And a lot of those seminars are, the regular parent are not exposed to them. And I'm sitting there and I'm just like, I applied to go be on the coach's site. I tried, I kind of created something I can talk about. And I know it's, maybe one day it'll happen, but I'm like, you know what? I'm like maybe I could create my own seminar with the people that I've built relationships with that just love this community, are in the area. And let's do something for the people that are moving up with these kids and actually educate them. Because I think that's the biggest thing. It's like parents, yes, they want the best for their kids. Is it over excessive of what they're doing? Sometimes 100%, but I think it's a lack of education and it's not their fault. They're just not exposed to it yet. And I was like, can we create something that can expose like this community on what it actually, what development should look like? The myths on working out, people think working out they're going to break your back, but really overuse of, I hear about these kids doing stress fractures because they're doing 10 ice sessions a week in 5 days. You know what I mean? It's wild. And then
Hmm.
school and then everything on top of it, right? So or like what's that classic OHL player, someone that is going to OHL to that next level and they think skill can get them there, but then everything changes when they get to that next step. So this whole conference is like trying to understand what development is at a young age and the steps we go through. And my idea is just to relate on personal experiences from people and what people should actually be looking at to actually make it. And if we can, preach to me, and to be honest, it's sold out. We have 80 people coming. We aim for 50. It's sold out in 3 days. I think that's all because of you, Satoshi, to be honest. But no, I just want to give more to this community. I want it to be done the right way. And, you start learning like the models from up high, but no one knows what there's like. People are searching, like, what are they doing? How are they getting there? And like, what does that look like? And if you don't understand that, you can't develop the best of your ability at the bottom levels. Like, there has to be a connection in this area in that, 13 to 15 to 16 of like, what does the transition of skill look like now? Like, what do these kids should be learning? Like, and it's overwhelming when people are trying to, you got to get better skater. No, you got to be skills. Now you got to learn hockey sense. Like, what does that look like? And I would just want to help people understand when they're searching for these areas of expertise to find people that are experts in the field that have worked with the next level, because those are the people that are going to understand the process, knowing what they need to get to that point. And those are people like yourself, people like Corey Locke, people, we have Rob, who is on the mindset to teach those components on like, when kids get into those negative traits. So I just wanted to create something with people like us that are passionate about it and just to give back to the community and educate.
Yeah, no, I think that's really important because, and I was a parent too with my own son. And I remember being that parent that used to kind of chase everybody, going, okay, what's he doing? What's he doing? Okay, I
Yeah,
got to go there because, so and so's there. It's like,
yeah,
yeah, but what that particular person needs might be different than what my son needed.
absolutely.
So I was probably one of those ones early on where I wasn't educated enough, or at
Yeah.
least the resources weren't
The
there
resource,
enough.
exactly, exactly. Yeah,
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 yeah. But now, whether it be social media or through live conferences like what you're doing, and I think it's great because now you're leveling the playing field,
yep, absolutely.
and you're essentially helping parents and athletes plan a strategy
Hmm.
for their development versus, I call it playing fetch, right? Like you throw a bone, everybody goes there. You throw another bone, everybody goes there. That's got to stop. It's got to stop. And I'm of the opinion of like, hey, let's come up with a long-term plan that says, okay, in the youth years, you might need these types of training.
Exactly.
But then as you get older, now you got to start to focus a little bit more on certain things. And sometimes that might be doing private sessions as opposed to doing a group session because groups are more for you're kind of hitting on a whole bunch of different things. Whereas with private sessions, they're now more specific to you. That there's a time and place for those types of training,
Hmm.
right? But to be able to develop that plan for parents, I mean, trust me, like I know our clients and their parents, and those parents typically own their own companies,
Yeah,
from what I found.
yeah.
And they come up with a business plan that's 5 years out,
Yeah, yeah.
but they can't do a plan for their own kid,
Their own kid.
right? To
Yeah,
from a
absolutely.
development point of view. And I
Absolutely.
think that's what you're trying to kind of help
Yeah,
educate that and the importance of that. And as far as my talk is concerned, yes, I'm going to talk about some tactical things
yeah,
that can be taught, but at the same time, it's going to be the importance of, hey, you need to develop a plan. right? Like there's a time and place for learning stuff that I'm going to talk about, or what Rob's talking about, or Corey's talking about. But they all kind of fit in an ecosystem with timing,
Yep.
just like hockey, right? You
Yep.
got to get to a certain place at the right time. And I think that's also applicable for some of the youth and the parents community as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's, you know what, you wrapped it up there, and that's the goal. You know, what I mean, it's creating that blueprint for them. And you know, sometimes people they got to go through the process and learn on the go. But if we can help, you know, a certain percentage of just see what it's at and what we can help them with, and it'll go far away.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Well, I'm gonna ask you one final question. If you could go back in time, knowing what you know now, would you have changed anything as far as your development is concerned?
Yeah, oof, that's a great question. And you know, I think for me, it wasn't until I was out of my career where I realized what my issue was to get to the next steps. And I was listening to a podcast, and they were talking about the fear of success. And
Mm,
it brought me back to a time in my pro career where I was having a tremendous amount of success, and I'm like, This is my shot." I was 24. I'm like, I'm gonna make it. Like I'm getting all these opportunities. I'm there, and then all of a sudden, I got to a point. I remember like this situation like it was yesterday. I'm lining up on a face off, and they started line matching me every single game. And this face
mm,
off came, and I came, and I'm like, "Oh man!" I'm like, "These guys are line matching me." And if something in my head just clicked, where I was like, "I got to be this guy every day now." And I struggle with that. I struggle with that, and I struggle with consistency. And I think if the one thing I would change, I think I wish I had like I wish I would have known what that I was feeling, what I was going through at that time. And I really think that's when you get, you know, to that professional standpoint, those are things that make you break you. So for me, I think you know, consistency was an issue, but it was because I didn't know how to deal with some areas in that mindset approach that I didn't know was a thing. And I wish I would have had that during my career. I think for me, this is what I'm trying to promote now and why I want to do what I want to do. And so I think that's the biggest thing for me. I heard it from Les Brown. It was called The Fear of Success, and it sticks with me every day. And I preach it. I'm not afraid to share it because I see people struggling with it all the time. And I don't know how these players that are in this game that are doing it every single day. So it's amazing to see. But yeah, I would say that's probably one component.
yeah, I know that's a great answer. I mean, you know, people are usually fear of failure,
Yeah,
right? And that prevents them from getting to certain levels. But what you're talking about is assuming you have success. Sometimes people are, like you said, they have the fear of succeeding, and then that holds them back,
holds them back. Yeah, absolutely.
right?
You know what? It's with this business I'm in now and how it's growing. Like that's something I've worked on. Like confidence is, you know, everyone's like, you're a confident guy. It's a thing that you need to work on nonstop and doing scenarios like this, putting yourself out there in front of people because you know it's a tough thing for you to do, but you do it. And now for me, the only difference is I know where my weak areas at, and I build strength in there by getting the proper teammates in my corner to help me get to the next level. And for me, it's all about partnerships to get the next level, trusting on other people and being part of a team. And that's what Shield is. You're coming into a professional sports organization that, you know, caters to development. And
Yeah,
there's a purpose.
and you know what I love about your company is that it's called Shield. It's not Brandon's Hockey Academy,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
absolutely. Yeah,
So, and I think that's important for business owners as well, that you want to be able to kind of step away and, you know, even if you've stepped away from the business, it still goes.
still goes. Exactly.
And so what you've built is essentially a system of different partners and ecosystem partners that can still provide those services at the highest level, and you can essentially just oversee that.
Absolutely.
So yeah, you know, which is something that we're trying to do here as well. Like I don't call it Satoshi's cognitive
Yeah,
company, right?
yeah,
Or our Satoshi's
absolutely.
hockey business. That we're both kind of on that level of, okay, we want to build systems that are extremely good in those certain areas, and then you can step away and you can still see it through. So I commend you on the business side as well, because I'm a
Thanks.
business guy through and through.
Thanks, Satoshi. Appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, and then the last question is, how do people reach out to you and find you
Yeah, so
and get in
yeah,
contact?
So our website, I feel like the website's never stopped growing. So website, shieldathletics.ca, just to kind of see our programs, what we're doing. Personally, we're on Instagram, Shield Athletics or Shield Performance. You can find us on Instagram. And then just my personal one, Coach Coccimiglio, if everyone reach out for questions or advice. We've started a new stream where we're launching out where like you can call us for advice on your development. And I have a gentleman named Kareem and AJ that are taking calls on a daily basis right now, just helping people figure out what they need in their next steps or what they need in the now to develop their kids. So, we're trying to do things a different way and on a personal basis. And so, yeah, I think those are the best areas to reach out to us.
That's awesome, man. I really appreciate you coming on today, and I look forward to the event, and looking forward to seeing you again soon. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. Appreciate it.
Of course, Josh, thanks for having me. Appreciate it too.
Awesome. Thank you. So that concludes this episode. Make sure you are paying attention to our YouTube channel and all the other areas where we're going to publish this podcast. And hopefully we'll see you on the next episode of the Cognition School. So thanks very much again.
Thanks, Satoshi.